Dragon Dreams, Book 5, Sacred Phoenix Heart, written by Gina Virginia Casella. This is part two of The Purple King. It's okay to love my life. And I'm just going back a few pages. I'm on 383. In a different life, and it's hard to keep track of timelines, to protect me during a time of fear and persecution, my husband started a rumor that I had died. It was easy to lie about it because so many people were rapidly dying of illness or violence. Poets and seers were being exterminated daily. It was like humanity had its panties in a knot and freaking out to regain control. But they never had control, and the dense forest was being clear cut daily to deter any monsters from entering the community area, as the wide open space easily exposed anyone or thing, and large animals were killed as they became more exposed as their homes were destroyed. The large animal bones were often mixed together to create a monster skeleton. Yet at this time, all folks knew what bones and body parts of animals looked like, so it was just stupid to try to fool the public. And of course, those who spoke out were killed, and eventually, only the designated elite were allowed to hunt and leave the community, because the truth was, only they were allowed to know what bones and bodies of different species looked like, so they could take away this knowing from the public to control them further. A reflection with our processed food today. Eventually, there was a generation that didn't know how to hunt or recognize edible plants from poisonous plants. They genuinely weren't aware of the animal species outside the community. So it was easy to switch up body parts, creating monsters and new fake species bullies could blame. It was easy to make up hero stories. So more and more, the space grew between the forest and the community to keep anyone out. And eventually, yet, for what it's worth, who the hell would want to enter this area anyways? I mean, given all the violence, and that was the thing. The clear-cut forest made it easy for anyone or thing to be seen, so there would be no sneaking up on the community. Yet, the truth is, the clear-cut forest kept folks in the community like a jail, and the forest became a place of fear, fear of the unknown. No one was allowed to leave, and eventually no one wanted to leave out of fear. Bullies enjoying their entertainment, yet the clear-cut forest never stopped the formless folks, and many formed folks flew up in the darkness of the sky and in broad daylight, given their formless state. So many bullies were focused on looking on the ground. It made it easy for many to travel above in the sky. Yet you see, those folks were always traveling in the sky long before this anyways. Meanwhile, deep underground, tunnels were made to travel. Well, you see, those tunnels were always there before this time, too. Both sky folk and underground folk were always there, well before the time of the moon. It's just during this violent time, they exposed themselves. They had already exposed themselves to some, but now they exposed themselves to many of the non-bullies and their tunnel system to this humanity, inviting our kind to be with them and to use their tunnels for safe travels. The sky folk also invited us, yet we couldn't breathe at the high altitudes. So those who could experience out-of-body experiences and remote viewing could travel by sky interacting with sky folks and also acquire information to help, given their bird's eye view. And the underground folk in particular told us all kinds of stories about long ago, long before the moon, and they truly delighted in telling stories about the goldfish dancing on land. And the way they told the stories, it was as if the goldfish was still alive. And the delightful story just happened yesterday. The goldfish was one who greeted the underground folk upon their arrival. They interacted with the goldfish at night, in shadows, in the deep dark sea, and they laugh, recalling how hilarious the goldfish was, truly enjoying life and being in complete bliss. In the daylight, they stayed in the shadows, watching, entertained by the goldfish. And the goldfish was more than happy to have an audience. And the goldfish was so funny, often acting like he didn't notice he was being watched. And often on purpose, the goldfish would dramatically trip over something, falling down in slow motion. And he would roll an exaggerated distance in slow motion and found it extra hilarious. And it was simply hilarious when the goldfish would roll up a tree or roll up a hill or in and out of the water. And on one occasion, he dramatically rolled into the arms of a mother four-legged who was bathing her babies as if she wouldn't notice confusing him as one of her own babies. And the way he excused himself to the mother made it that much more funny, as if he didn't notice. Meanwhile, it was totally intentional. And on one occasion, he was rolling and stopped suddenly standing up because he wanted to quickly chat with an insect in a tree he hadn't seen in a while. But then he went back to rolling dramatically, but not without dramatically falling down all over again. And the adult underground folk would laugh just as much as their children. And on this occasion in particular, he accidentally started rolling the wrong way, returning to the direction he came from. So he dramatically looped around back to the correct direction. And just thinking of it is so funny. And the goldfish also laughed and laughed at himself in these moments. And moment after moment was like this. And the thing is, however, wherever he landed, there was always something special there, like berries to eat or beautiful flowers to decorate with, and portholes. On more than one occasion, the goldfish really would get into his dramatic rolling, making all the children laugh, and he would accidentally roll right over by the thing he wanted to show. So again, he had to loop around, and it was simply hilarious, especially the time he rolled into the seaweed and it stuck on his body. And so he rolled, and the seaweed stayed stuck on his head. And so as he rolled, he acted like it was some fancy hairdo. And again, it was simply hilarious. And the goldfish in these moments would act serious, as if the seaweed really was his hair, and he didn't understand why others laughed. And this just made it that much more funny. But on a serious note, the goldfish knew the underground folks didn't know the area or what was safe to eat. And portholes were important because it made it easy for travel. But mostly, the children in particular got confused with sunset and sunrise. They could easily find their way underground safely, for there are countless portholes. So, this is how he showed them during the day. And at night, they could gather these resources and test out the portholes. The goldfish knew of medicine as the underground folk experienced aches in their bodies and things like headaches. The goldfish understood there were plenty for the underground folk to eat that grew in the shade, yet he also understood that they would benefit from things that blossomed in the full sun, which they could collect at night. And the goldfish also showed them things like hot springs and lava to assist with staying warm and cozy, adding to their experience in this paradise. Not only was it hilarious to observe the goldfish, it was essential. The underground folk intended to stay a short time, this planet a pit stop, if you will, but they loved the goldfish so much. And before you knew it, the underground folks had lots of children and grandchildren, which made them feel like they should stay. and they were clearly compatible with this planet, and most of all, this planet was safe. The underground folk would have died of starvation if it wasn't for the goldfish. Each day, the goldfish would parade around, celebrating life, and each time was like the first time over and over again. And each night until early morning, the goldfish enjoyed chatting with the underground folk. The goldfish seemed to have an abundance of energy, never really sleeping, only napping. I don't think it's our planet that made the underground folks want to stay here. It was the incredible, triumphant goldfish. They never saw anyone like the goldfish, and they desired their descendants to be around such incredible energy. It was such a delight. The goldfish, yes, was tracking the sun and fascinated by shade and shadows, but the goldfish was also trying to find ways for the underground folk to be above ground during the daytime. And this is the truth about why the other ETs killed the goldfish. They demanded the goldfish tell the truth about the secrets of the universe and things like time and the universe expanding. They wanted to know about the folks underground, resources, and portholes. But the goldfish genuinely had lots of friends underground and told the ETs about folks like worms and species they were already aware of. The goldfish spoke of all species but them, and the goldfish showed them rabbit holes rather than portholes. The goldfish didn't understand the reasons, nor did the goldfish care to understand them. The goldfish only understood it was dangerous to reveal any information, and this business of the moon didn't sit right with the goldfish. As soon as the moon came, so did the bully ETs, who initially presented as friends. But the goldfish always knew they were bullies. He was in denial about it. He worked with each present moment and believed they would make good choices. You see, these stories all connect, and all the timelines and dimensions connect. And there are gaps and confusion here. But don't overthink it. The real monsters, who were the bullies in the community of the other story, they were running out of spaces to hide and running out of monsters to blame because there was barely any forest left, including the species that came with the ecosystem. The underground folks knew friend from foe, so they invited many underground. The terrestrial bullies became the ET bullies. From the bullies' perspective, they were leaving everyone behind to die. Meanwhile, they thought they could live inside a fake planet until this one healed, so they created what we know as the moon, so they could hide behind it and inside of it while monitoring the planet, as in monitoring their entertainment. And yes, dimension-wise and time-wise, all these storylines overlap. They hoped to return to this planet, yet their forms now struggle to be compatible with it. Also, given the brutality, they know they're far from welcomed, and they're all dead now, so their descendants learning the truth and are hopeful to call a truce. And if not, they say they'll assist with our ascension. It doesn't make sense we hate each other for the sins of our ancestors. If the moon were to leave, the whole planetary system we belong to would fall apart. So it's like they're doing us a favor by sticking around. And it's hard for them knowing their history, yet they rise above. So yes, there are many stories within stories, and underground folk were ETs, yes, but from a different place, a different ET species than the bully ETs. They were general explorers. So long ago, the folks underground and the goldfish concluded it was best to forget about each other altogether, so there could be no slip of the tongue. So they stopped communication with the goldfish altogether. which made the goldfish parade around that much more, singing louder to ensure the underground folk could still hear him, which they did. And they laughed because sometimes it was annoying. You see, the daytime was when they slept. So the goldfish, according to the stories long ago, ended up staying quiet during the day. Yet each dusk would splish splash making noise, singing, making lots of noise, the original rooster, if you will. And of course, parade around like he loved to. And of course, get into his dramatic falling and rolling. And each dusk and dawn became a special time of day for these reasons. And why fish bite during the dusk and dawn? Because they're in tune with this cycle from their goldfish ancestor, as are many other species. Any memories the underground folk and the goldfish had of each other became like a dream, and generations passed by, the goldfish having a significant longer lifespan remembered. Yet the new generation of underground folk only had stories, pictures, and songs to help them remember. Sometimes they would unintentionally see each other in both light and darkness, and the goldfish was known to smile so brightly it was almost blinding, the golden colors, and in a flash the goldfish gone. Some believed if you saw the goldfish, you were lucky because no one could sneak up on the goldfish. You only saw him if he wanted you to see him. And one day, when someone was telling a group of children and adults this story, the goldfish quickly appeared and vanished to confirm they were correct. And this is why the fox are like this today, in honor of the goldfish. Because if you see a fox, it's because it wanted you to see it, and it's considered lucky, just as it was lucky to see the goldfish. The goldfish was more of a bright orange, like a yellow with orange making him so gold. And this golden big body of the goldfish became known as the pot of gold found at the end of a rainbow, for the goldfish could fly and was everywhere, sliding around, even on rainbows, and even twinkling in the night sky. Yet time crossed with duality, was making the goldfish choose between the water or the air, and given his relationship with the underground folk, he chose the water. So more and more, the goldfish was able to spend less and less time out of the water. One day, the descendants of the bully ETs came, demanding information about folks underground. Essentially, they wanted to know how they traveled here, convinced it was through mind power or portholes or both. The goldfish knew everything about portholes, etc. I mean, that's how the goldfish got around. And it was the goldfish who showed the underground folk many of the portholes and shared his knowledge with them. The ETs were spying from above. They had meetings and confused information. You see, the goldfish could tell them about portholes and whatnot, but these ETs insisted the underground folks had all the information. They weren't spying in the right moments where the goldfish shared this knowledge with the underground folk. So they didn't even know the goldfish had all the information, and the underground folk only had the limited information the goldfish shared. It was so confusing, and a testament to these ETs' misinformation and stupidity as they were spying away and not spying away. And the goldfish genuinely upset that the bully ETs, although bullies, missed out on the hilarity of him dramatically rolling around to show things. He also was genuinely disappointed that he didn't know he also had this other audience. Another audience? I mean, lucky him. Yet the sky audience wasn't even paying attention, totally missing out. And he wondered if there were any more audiences. He was only aware of his audiences with nature and the underground folk. Perhaps folks who were dreaming in other places could be an audience. And like a comedian, the goldfish loved having an audience. So when the goldfish was being murdered, it was too risky for the underground folk to expose themselves to help the goldfish, which is a separate story somewhere in this series. And as a result, to the horror of the goldfish, nature did what we call seasons to honor the goldfish. As a result, to honor the goldfish, nature did what we call seasons. Yes, these bully descendants stayed here hoping to discover secrets. So the seasons set in as a strategy to get rid of them. And the cold was also perceived as a way to cleanse nature from this trauma while allowing their life forms to flourish, allowing other life forms to flourish. The underground folk even went further underground so future children of both ET parties would less likely cross paths. The sky folk simply stayed in the sky. Some of the other type of sky folk made it forbidden for their young to land here, and they tend to stay outside our ozone layer and far into outer space. It was powerful to have seasonal cycles because the goldfish treated each day as a cycle. So it was, yes, a way to make life miserable for the bully ETs while also honoring the goldfish while not harming nature. Moreover, duality was intensifying, so seasonal changes were a good thing. Symbolically, when the goldfish died or was killed, to be more specific, all of nature was appalled and decided right there on the spot they would not support these bully ETs. It was the first time the sovereignty goddess, if you will, recoiled, and respectfully recoiled. Yet nature knew these ETs had children who played no part in their parents' cruelty, so it wasn't fair to completely deprive them of resources. So the day the goldfish was killed became known as the first day of fall, the first day sovereignty recoiled, the first warning of winter, and winter never asks to come. Winter simply comes, and fall is not so much a warning, but a remembering of this troubling time. The dark winter representative of the literal dark descent the underground folk took, the shorter, darker days winter brings that came to the above ground folk with winter's deprivation of resources and the emotionally dark days mourning the goldfish's death. Yet, winter's darkness gave birth to the extended season of dreams. Rather than be cold, cold as in metaphorically, allegorically, and literally, it was best to cozy up and dream, for many species like the dragons, to slumber, to undergo introspection, and for all to enter the deep, dark forest within the mind, to rediscover their dreams, as in rediscover themselves, to create new dreams, to rediscover what happiness is, to recalibrate, and to use the dream world as a place to connect with various aspects of ourselves, other dimensions, other star nations, other audiences, and our oneness. After the goldfish died, his body was left there for the birds to pick and the decomposers to decompose. And yet, no birds picked at it, and no worms or decomposers touched him. The underground folk took the goldfish's body deep under the sea, which we know as a golden treasure chest. It's hidden deep in the sea in a cave that has no water, and it's a place that glitters gold because of the goldfish. Underground folk would visit to pay their respects, yet some of the bully ETs and their misinformation thought there was literally gold under the sea somewhere. So the sea dragons protected the area like a guard dog would. And the sea dragon's very dark and shadowy, so no one could see the gold shine through. So over time, no one even knows where this location is anymore, and it's best this way. Also, the dragon folk have their own tales, and they report that the goldfish communicated to them in dreams and as requested by the goldfish, the dragon surrendered the goldfish's body to a porthole so he could be part of the golden sun shining down on all of us. The first day of fall is the day each and every single form of nature bowed deeply in respect to the loss of the goldfish. The trees in particular took it hard, and so did the sky and sea. I mean, the trees could have easily stomped on the ETs. The sea could have easily drowned them. The sky could have easily smoked them. Yet it would break the commitment of the co-dream they agreed to. The dragons were in a state of deep slumber when this was happening, and they perceived this reality as a nightmare, always vowing to wake up just in case such dreams were real. And they did wake up just in case the goldfish needed their help, but it was too late. And the dragons made an agreement not to get involved with the various evolving species, as they were unintentionally too ferocious and also at risk for being captured. And they were perceived as a prized item from the primordial days. So dragons who resided here were like a secret the goldfish knew about. The dragons revealed themselves to the underground folk after the goldfish's death because they were aware of all the information dreaming away as it all unfolded. And to be honest, it was a burden for the underground folk to protect the place deep in the sea where the goldfish's body was. So the sea dragons were happy to take on this role. And yes, there were many various dragons. So to recap, no one could help the goldfish. It was a lot of emotional turmoil for everyone, even the bully ETs. In reality, it was only a few bully ETs running the show, while the rest were scared following their orders. And the goldfish understood this. It was hell for everyone, and the rest of nature to be a bystander. They couldn't do anything but watch. So this is why trees are starting to walk, if you will. Because upon their own reflection, they should have walked the day the goldfish was killed, but they were manipulated, like the rest of us, to believe they made a contract they need to abide to. Contracts are intentions, and the Akashic records can be edited, so the trees are rewriting their own stories. But as they do, they rewrite them again and again, and they've learned, if they do stomp on other ETs, that they're no better than them, which is a good thing, because no one is better than the other. Yet they felt if they were to be equal, it would be equal in a higher level kind of way, not a lower level way. And they laugh because stomping on the ETs isn't the answer. So the trees rewrite their stories time and time again. The new story has no Homo sapiens or ETs, just simple animal folk, if you will, and their stories. There's a goldfish dancing on land. They call it the sun. And when the wind touches the sun's rays, it's like stroking a guitar, which is the sound of the goldfish's music he'd create each morning with his loud parading around. And the trees describe the gentle rustling of leaves and tall grasses at dawn as the gentle music the goldfish would play, as if lulling all the non-nocturnal folk to sleep. This was inspired by the sounds goldfish made to communicate time to the underground folk, who went so far underground they didn't know if it was daytime or nighttime anymore. So the trees and rocks, for that matter, have a lot to say and a lot to write and rewrite. And the trees and each piece of sand play along with Gina's story as they became the trees in the pine tree forest. So they're merging with Gina's story, her dream. Imagine that, co-dreaming with trees and other forms of nature. Well, it's easy, I suppose, because we're all part of nature. More specifically, we're all one. I am the tree, and the tree is me. So it's all coming together. So to honor the goldfish, this is why each day the sky turns fiery colors at dusk and dawn to honor the goldfish that once danced on land. And now it's also why the trees change colors seasonally. Koi fish, as you know, are spotted, and this is to show their respect. Folks like the fox and whatnot also shining out these colors. Some of the trees committed to staying green all year round to support life, and the evergreen trees in particular, among other species that are not the colors of fire, stand the tallest to salute the golden colors daily, representative of saluting the goldfish, everything the goldfish represented. So it's worth noting in this moment that if you're confused about timelines or storylines, it's okay. It's a lot to take in. The goldfish was Gina. This was mentioned before somewhere in the series, and if not, well, now you know. And this is another reason why so many know her energy. And she is both revered for her goldfish past and also feared about how her life was taken to save another's. She died because she put the lives of others before her own, which didn't help the false inhibiting belief she feels today, that her life doesn't matter, or that other lives come before hers. When the goldfish made his way to the life between lives, wow, did those folks ever get a mouthful about the chaos in general, and also a mouthful about the goldfish life and how the goldfish life matters. The goldfish was murdered. The goldfish could have continued living many, many, many years. And if the goldfish loved anything, the goldfish loved his life. So for his life to be taken away was appalling. Yet the goldfish would rather his life be taken than another. And this is why Gina struggles with being in service to others and being in service to a greater cause. The goldfish was serving others and the greater cause by being the blissful being he was. He totally embodied and represented what it meant to be joyful. This whole murder scene and what led up to it could not possibly be in his contract. The goldfish was the first to challenge this business of contracts, and this life between lives he deemed was bullshit. It was corrupt. The goldfish was able to rise above. You see, when the ETs who killed him died, he went with the Grim Reaper to collect their souls. They died of old age, and knowing death was closing in, they said many prayers, and lots of prayers before then, asking for forgiveness. And he forgave the very ETs who killed him. Those very ETs who asked for forgiveness begged for it, because they came to appreciate life, all life, and they never knew what joy or even what bliss was until they met the goldfish. And their reputations negatively impacted their descendants' behavior for generations because of the cruelty of what they role modeled. They also wanted to rewrite their stories, and so some of those stories are now in effect. And this makes timelines and storylines more confusing, which is why we shouldn't get hung up on the past or details, because none of those things matter. Only the now matters. These ETs ended up learning they needed to forgive themselves. So they did. And by doing so, the goldfish, who is Gina, forgave herself because she learned these ETs' behavior was role modeled after her behavior long ago. So long ago, she buried it away. Remember? She used to be benevolent. We all were. Then she became unintentionally very evil, undergoing her investigation in the life between lives, which is captured in book 1 of this series. And so Gina and these ETs respectfully have lots of space between them as a healthy boundary, and yet they have no space given their oneness, and yours too. Powerfully, they recognize we all come from the same source energy and that we're all one. Also, they are so far removed from these horrific tales that they forget them. But the part they need to remember is that they forgave each other. Moreover, they forgave themselves. When folks say things like, there is nothing to forgive, they really mean it because it means the story was rewritten. So the sin no longer occurs. So there is no more crime, no more story or record of it. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to apologize today for something that no longer exists, as there really is nothing to forgive. And forgive really means foraging the giving, as in giving the opportunity to forage new dreams and moving on, to rewrite stories. So in order to move on, we can't stay stuck, as in stuck in the past or caught up in storylines or cycles. The oneness we are required to forgive. So we call all to forgive, and we can all forage forward. It's not for taking, it's forgiving. Taking would be going back into the past, which is not possible. Only the present moment exists. And if you can forgive in the present moment, then you can move on to the future, which is the next moment. And this is just one of many reasons why only the now matters, the present moment. I forgive you. I forgive myself. I accept you. I accept myself. Us is as is. Isis. Isis enough. Things are available to Isis. Isis the same as everyone else. Isis love my life, and life loves Isis. Spirit of Gina seems very whole and holy, yet the biological one known as Gina struggles with this kind of stuff. Although she's getting better, it would be easier for her and everyone if we treated each other with kindness. Yes, kindness. It's so simple. And the golden age is thy kingdom come, because the golden age never ended, only seemingly, because our minds were stuck in such a dark storm. But the storm has cleared, yet many confused about what clarity is. Thy kingdom come, as in, thy kingdom is here, always was, and always will be. Thy kingdom here, thy kingdom there, thy kingdom everywhere, thy kingdom nowhere, thy kingdom come, and most of all, thy kingdom done, as in, the past is done, over, and we can't have it back. Even if we wanted it back, we can't have it back. And thy kingdom undone, meaning thy kingdom continues to unfold, as does the universe, as we are the universe, and we are thy kingdom. We are thy. Is as is. Isis, thy kingdom, Isis. So, to fill in some gaps, the underground folks are still here evolving next to us. And they were always quite fast and psychic. So it's easy for them to hide or do things like mudslides or slight earthquakes to block off an area if we make our way there. And no, the earthquakes and mudslides never harm us. It's too easy for them to build tunnels and block tunnels, as it's their way of knowing, which is why it was an easy transition for them to initially go underground. They came from another star nation. They were explorers and loved our planet so much. They stayed intending this to be a temporary home. Yet the goldfish dancing on land was worth sticking around for, and they see themselves as part of this planet, although not from it. And they also see themselves as part of our history and part of our early community. They were also here long before we were. They understood long before us that we're related, sharing the same source energy. Their population grew, as did ours and others. The daylight was also too bright for them, so they thrived at night. They became what we call nocturnal folk. Some of the younger, curious ones pushed their luck exploring above ground and used special sunglasses and mud to cover their bodies to protect themselves from the sun. Today, they wear special clothing. There's much to be said, and most of it goes over Gina's head. Yet others will fill in these gaps. So anyways, back to one of the initial storylines. My husband spread false rumors about dangerous animals and toxic water in the area, only so I could have a safe place to live. The intention was that rather than cut back everything and kill folks, why not leave? But the reality was that the very folks in the community were the monsters. And so wherever they went or stayed, there was always upset. Many other husbands made up lies to safeguard their families and the forest's resources. Many became quite isolated, and the forest was regrowing. The underground folk worked with the chipmunk folk and bird folk to distribute seeds. If everyone bumped into each other, if anyone bumped into each other, of course they said they weren't from here, just passing by. Meanwhile, they totally lived there, and many lived inside large trees, caves, and underground tunnels. Eventually, folks would recognize their neighbors, and we looked out for each other. We would pile rocks as a discreet symbol of our peaceful presence. We would also do things like leave flowers. These symbols, yes, meant peace, but it was also a sign that we needed to be careful, because if they could see us or find traces of us, then who else could? So whenever we found these symbols, we had to be extra careful. And each time my husband had us relocate, the situation grew so dire that families went into hiding, never to be accounted for again. Even when peace returned, some families and species continued pretending to be dead or extinct to remain hidden and therefore protected. False beliefs that inhibited emotional expression developed unintentionally during these challenging times. As a means of self-protection, my mind misinterpreted hiding, staying quiet, staying small, and lurking in the shadows as safe strategies. In truth, suppressing oneself emotionally is never beneficial. These reasons add to Gina's false inhibiting beliefs today. The Purple King tells me the Gnome King is greatly respected as a gatekeeper. The Gnome King works with the shapeshifters and energies that allowed doors, if you will, to be open. It was the Gnome King who initiated the invitation for everyone to reunite with their cousins, meaning the Gnome King was the middleman and bridge for the various folks to connect with and help each other during such dark times. Just as rabbits burrow underground, so too do these cousins who live in subterranean realms, as well as other places. When conditions improved, many chose to remain below the surface. Other clans departed for the depths of the ocean, the heights of the sky, the thick of the forest, the heart of the mountains, and even other dimensions entirely. To thrive in these diverse environments, their physical forms and ways of perceiving have adapted accordingly. Having said this, it caused space between us, as those who have left can't come back because the environment won't support them. And again, duality makes things more difficult, even among terrestrial folks, as fish, for example, need to stay in the water. Evolution, even conscious evolution, is often perceived as bullshit evolution, as it continues to separate us. Evolution is lost and confused. And like in the hilarious story of the goldfish dramatically rolling in the wrong direction, the unfolding universe is doing the same. For we are the universe, and it will curve back to the right path. And this curving is known as awakening. But after awakening, we must take action, which the universe will, because it only steers in the direction of harmony. And our oneness is the most beautiful harmony there ever was. And it's quite frustrating, yes, because the universe had to find disharmony to seek harmony. So, as we recall these stories, we recall the theme of returning to our whole and holy oneness, along with the other themes like unconditional love. Returning to oneness is returning home. My husband and I hid in the forest, blending in and merging with the trees like others. The trees sheltered us and protected us with portholes, allowing instant travel anywhere. This exemplifies why the heart chakra is green. Green for the forest, where heart energy flourishes. You can cut back the forest, but our roots remain firm, just as with hopes and dreams. Wisdom is never lost when torn down. The spirit stays unbroken, and we are the dream, the roots, the keys, the seeds, simultaneously everything and no thing. The color green, representing the heart chakra, honors the gnome king, and the yellow and blue families who collaborated to cultivate more biology, moss, plants, and trees during this dark time. This restoration of the forest provided resources for the planet's inhabitants. The families acted out of kindness and compassion, not for points or rewards, hence the currency of the heart. They came from a place of level-headedness, providing equality for all species, whom they saw as children of the divine, unconditionally loved star children. The serene lifetimes. In these serene lifetimes, I found joy in assisting strangers. Folks sought me out, so staying put brought anticipation as I awaited their coming. Nature sounds heralded someone's approach. I offered hypnotherapy, though gossip swirled of my magical gifts, when in truth, it was the science of belief at work. Many came just to unburden themselves, needing no response from me. They divulged their admissions or fantastical stories, seeking only an attentive ear. Others arrived merely to confirm my existence. Upon finding me, tears of elation flowed as my reality validated the profound hopes nestled in their hearts. A reflection of the time I was the lizard lady and the goldfish. I engaged people in ceremonial rituals and practices. This deeply resonated with them. For example, I would have individuals speak their thoughts and feelings into a rock, then toss the rock into the water as a symbolic act. Other times I invited them to whisper into a dried leaf before tossing it into the fire or crumbling it into the wind. I assigned meaning and color to symbols and found in things in nature like gemstones, giving the gemstones meaning. Most of it I made up on the spot, and the information I provided was inconsistent as it was a case-by-case scenario. I would gift them gemstones and souvenirs of the experience. Unbeknownst to me, these gemstones were native only to that region. Thus, they became tangible evidence that one had met me in person. People would stay with me anywhere from a few hours to a few months. I was not much of a host back then, since we all lived off the land in simple shelters. It was a lot of hangout, reflection, and meditation, along with collecting firewood. Often, people delighted in simply watching me do my ritual work, and I appreciated their efforts to stock me up on firewood. I always had lots of firewood because of this, which came in handy as I aged. I never feared those who came because I could sense their fear of me. The forest had a collective consciousness I was attuned to. People found me because the forest permitted it. Some never found me because the forest did not allow it. I was being protected by a community who recognized me as a shaman, one with no enemies, who can weave between worlds. They didn't permit some to find me, only because they would take away my time from others who really needed it, not because they wanted to hurt me or capture me. Plus, some folks wanted to live with me forever, and I didn't desire this at all. As much as I enjoyed helping others, I did enjoy solitude. So the forest honored this, keeping folks who like to linger away from me. There were also many interwoven stories I am reviewing as I reframe my dream journal, revealing more insights and downloads. I allow my husband to step up in my life and provide for me, realizing this surrender is how I manifest. Surrendering this part of myself that needs provision is fantastic. My husband provides for me just as Eagle Condor cares for me in the eagle's nest, a representation of the universe's provision. I need to stop confusing being provided for with being a dependent child. While there are spoiled adults who use people to avoid responsibilities, I am not one of them. The universe knows I am no better than those people either. Do not despair, my child, for it is a grave sin. Where there is breath, there is life, and where there is life, there is belief. Where there is belief, there is hope. I am the wind breathing life, and you are the one who lives it fully. You embody belief in dreams. Dreams illuminate the path, so I follow my heart with deep conviction. The Purple King inquires what I hope for, though he likely knows already. I yearn to feel cherished by my husband, loved wholeheartedly by his devotion and calm provision. The Purple King said, "My husband will be my king, so he's going to be a stand-up man, and I'm in for a wonderful experience if I allow myself to be open to this." "Yes, you are open to it," he replied. "That's why you're having all these thoughts about it." He advises me to allow my heart to open with excitement when beginning a new relationship, rather than closing it off out of fear. He says that the next time I feel my heart blooming with joy, as it did when getting to know a particular man I met online, I should let it unfold rather than shutting it down for self-protection. The king encourages me to embrace opportunities for love, trusting that real love brings ease rather than struggle. I ask the Purple King what his name is. Maybe Gino, the masculine for Gina, but he seems unsure whether it is Ricky or Raymond. He laughs in frustration. Laughter takes effort for him, yet flows freely. Lacking the energy to state his name, he says, for now, I may call him the Purple King. His archetype, not his name. Our names matter little, he explains, for in our essence we are one. Kings and queens, gods embodied, both form and formless. We exist here and not here, everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. We are the thoughts and dreams of the universe itself. We are dragons, and dreaming is what we do. So I must follow my dreams, as they know the way home. Like salmon and sea turtles navigating by instinct, I will follow my heart. The Purple King shares insight with me, though his source is unclear. He speaks of unseen forces, the pulse, the drive that compels us like magnets. He describes thought itself as an anonymous energy created by some greater power. In his view, basic elements of existence are one with the divine, content simply to be, representing the potential to think, yet thinking transforms potential into action, which can be unsafe, for one person's thoughts may conflict with another's. Thus, ideas can be a deceptive sense of power and danger. Ideas can be dangerous, even if well-intended. In the timeless ethereal realm, only a select few, like delegates representing a committee, are chosen to think and ponder. This is precisely because to exist is to think, and to think is to create thoughts. We are nothing more than the thoughts we generate. We are nothing but a thought. The king smiles at me and starts to vanish, a smirk across his face, or at least that is the scene my mind conjures. There is no moment like the present moment, he says. Present Moment Hypnotherapy International. And this little phrase for 3 years would be part of my email signature and little quote in social media, which I would change later to Present Moment Alchemy, which is now just called Dragon Dreams. He bursts into laughter at the notion, international, for in truth, everything is local, even on a galactic scale. The king places his hand on my head and tells me that I am him. He says this is all part of my transition into an upgraded life as part of the Great Galactic Navy and not the guns type, and that my committee, the ones who listen, is a huge success, as are the others. He claims these thoughts energize him, and he finally fades away. His voice lingers, saying, my will is your will, and your will is my will. I am I. He says, I am I. And I reply, I am I. We say it in unison, I am I. I am wondering if he is the Gnome King. He confirms that he is the Elemental King. To be more specific, the name Ricky Raymond is not intended to mean it is intended, Ricky Raymond is intended to mean rainbow ray of light, but the meaning is lost in translation. Ricky Raymond does not resonate with him. He prefers rainbow ray of light, as he sees himself as the rainbow in the darkness, the ray of light that transforms potential energy into kinetic energy. He believes the light is embedded in everything because it is everything, just as he and I are everything. We are linked to the dragon because we are the dragon. For clarity, everyone and everything is one and the same, and the Purple King would like me to simply call him the Purple King. All the spirit guides seem to understand who I am referring to when I say that. It's like when the Grim Reaper calls me Gina Sophia. It helps with the timestamp.